Welcome to another episode of Living Legend Lawyers, Hawaii State Bar Association's three-digit project. Today our episode is entitled Professionalism Over the Years, and we have with us today three of the most professional attorneys our state has ever known, having three-digit bar numbers. We have Donald Wong, who is three-digit 909. We have Justice James Duffy, who's 775. And we have Carroll Taylor, who's number 906.
Correct.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for coming today. We really we appreciate it very much. Thank you. Donald, let me start with you. Why the law? How did you make that decision to go into law? How old were you, and how did you fulfill that vision?
Well, I was born and raised here in Honolulu, and I went to undergraduate at Northwestern, specializing in engineering. When I got to my junior year in college, I knew that I didn't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. So my dad encouraged me to think about going to law school. So I went through the process of applying. I was at Northwestern, and my one goal in life was to get out of Chicago winters. So I applied to the West Coast.
Okay, so University of Chicago Law School wasn't on your radar.
Or Northwestern.
All right, I understand. So where'd you end up on the West Coast?
Stanford.
At Stanford. Okay, and you graduated what year?
Graduated in 1969.
All right.
Took the bar in September.
Here in Hawaii? Did you take it California?
Just in Hawaii.
Okay. And what did you do after that?
Actually, as Carol and Jim know, I got my induction notice 2 weeks before my graduation. We skipped graduation to fly back here so I could find out if I could get into a reserve unit with the National Guard. I got into the reserve unit, so in October, after I took the bar, I was in basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey for 6 months.
Wow.
So first year was kind of hectic after graduation.
Yes, sure sounds like it. Donald, is it true that for those young lawyers who have never gotten an induction notice or a draft notice, is it true that it says, "Greetings, you have been selected by your friends and neighbors," blah, blah, blah?
It said greetings, but I don't remember what it said after that, because by that point I was in complete panic.
Okay, all right. So 6 months? 6 months of training?
6 months of active duty and then 6 years of reserve training.
Okay, and were you able to serve those, well, after the first 6 months, were you able to serve the reserve?
Oh yeah, the reserve unit met down at Fort DeRussy. So every week we had a meeting, and then 2 weeks summer camp.
Okay, and did you work as an attorney in the military?
No, I was a court reporter.
Oh, really?
Yes, I was a clerk typist court reporter. Our unit was a 322nd Civil Affairs, which was one of the most notorious Army Reserve units in the history of the Army. We had people in there like Wayne Sakai, Steve O'Connell, Jeff Watanabe, all of whom were enlisted men. The officers used to come in, and they used to be intimidated by the reserve guys because we never listened to them.
No, I'm sure you didn't. Well, as a court reporter, I mean, did you actually learn the shorthand? Did you use the devices and so forth?
We used the mask. We had to go to training at Newport, Rhode Island, in Naval School of Military Justice, and use the mask. I never got it. Okay. My transcripts were unreadable.
Okay. Well, how about making the record? There's an issue right now. In fact, there's going to be some seminars on this coming up by the Young Lawyers Division, the Senior Division. They're going to collaborate on making the record, because there's some discussion in the bar currently that some of the young lawyers have a hard time making a concise, accurate record. They don't refer to exhibits by number when they're talking about it. They don't, if they're pointing to a part of an anatomy, they're not identifying for the record what they're pointing at. Did you learn in this experience how to make the record, and did it help you?
Not really. I mean, it was hard enough me trying to translate what I heard in my ear into my mouth and went into the record. It was an actual record that they used to record. Okay. It was horrible.
And were these military proceedings?
This was military.
Okay. So you didn't need to know Vietnamese or anything?
No.
Okay.
Most of the times you were going to be at Article, Article 26 or Article, whatever, Article 15 hearings, right? So it was the military that wanted this. But I went through it, graduated, and I never had to do it again once I got back home.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get back to your career in a second. Justice Duffy, could you tell us, where you were, where you went to school. Why did you decide on going to law school as opposed to some other profession or avocation?
Sure. What happened to me was I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, and when I say small, it was a town of 500. And we had one doctor, and the athletic coaches and the doctor were kind of people I looked up to in town. So I determined at an early age I was going to be either a doctor or involved as a basketball or baseball coach and that. But then what happened along the way was truly unfortunate. I was bad in the sciences in school, and I wasn't that much of an athlete either. Very enthusiastic. So I decided by the time I got to college, I thought I'm going to have to review my options, and I was a history and political science major, and it hit me in my sophomore year that lawyers were really had played a significant role in our history, both nationally and in the state I grew up in. I thought, well, let's see if I can do that. So I took the LSAT and did well with that and pursued law school. I went to Marquette Law School in Milwaukee.
All right.
And that's how I went in there. But I'm sort of a failed coach and doctor, I guess, looking at it from that point of view.
What year did you graduate from
I graduated in '68.
Okay. Did you take the bar exam in Hawaii right after that, or did you take it someplace else first?
Well, what had happened is I was fortunate that a small insurance defense firm, Cobb and Gould, recruited me out of Marquette in that. So I came out here in April of '68, before graduation, to establish residency, because I don't know if many of you folks remember, we had a one-year residency requirement at that time. So I opened a bank account and did several other things to indicate I was a Hawaii resident,
right.
and then came back after graduation and worked for Cobb and Gould, which was a wonderful starting place for me. And maybe we'll get into that later. But
No, I'd like.
Is now a good time? Okay,
It'd
well,
be fine, sure.
what happened was they asked me if I would be willing to do the subrogation cases on property damage claims for State Farm, which was a major client of the firm. And it turned out to be a great opportunity. I really had to learn the Hawaii rules of evidence, and I went to every district court on Oahu and several on neighbor islands, proving out these property damage claims. It probably had an average value of $500 or so. But I had to call police officers and work with them, and then also lay a foundation for exhibits on repair bills and calling in the auto repairman to establish his qualifications or her qualifications for what the bills would be. And I remember one case we even had where there was a dispute on Nimitz Highway as to whether both drivers had the green light. And there were photographs showing that both had the green light. So we had ended up with experts in this $500 case. But the beauty of that is that led to handling smaller bodily injury claims. And then it led to larger bodily injury claims. And that's where I was very fortunate that I ran into Wally Fujiyama on the other side of those cases. He and his firm were Chuck and Fujiyama at that time, and they were one of the two premier firms on the plaintiff side. The other one was Paget, Greeley, Muramoto, and Hakinaka. And for some reason, Wally took a liking to me. And that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me personally and for my career. It was just a wonderful opportunity.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we'll follow up with your long partnership with Wally as well. Carroll, thank you for being here, and tell us about your experience and where'd you go to law school, why the law, how did you decide to go into this, and how did you end up here?
I went to Yale for undergraduate and Berkeley for law school, graduated in '68. One of my law school professors was working with the Hawaii Legislative Reference Bureau on what became our health insurance law and our disability insurance law. Asked me if I wanted to come out, spend a year in Hawaii, working on those two projects. I had just gotten married, and that sounded like a nice way to spend the first year of a married life. So we came out in the September of '68, and then, like Jim says, there was a residency requirement, 1 year wait before
you take the bar exam.
To take the bar exam. But the way you establish your residency for the bar exam was to give them your voter registration certificate, because that you could only get if you'd been a resident for a year. So that made it easy for the court. You didn't have to think about whether you really were a resident. You either had a voter registration certificate or you didn't. Unfortunately for me, the first day of the bar exam was the first day that I'd been here for a year. So I went into the first day of the bar exam and explained that I didn't have a voter registration, but I was going to get one that afternoon. Sammy, who was the clerk, said, that's fine. He'd report to the CJ that that's what was going on. So that afternoon, I went to get my voter registration certificate, and they said, when and where did you last vote? And I said, last November, the presidential election. Where did you vote? California absentee, because I wasn't eligible to vote here. And then they said, well, that means you were a California resident in November. Therefore, you haven't been here for a year. Therefore, we're not giving you a voter registration certificate. You can forget about the rest of the bar exam.
Do you remember the name of the clerk who told you that?
Eileen Loda.
So I thought you might.
Yes. So to make a long story short, my wife was burning up the phones, making contacts with everybody, and I was in the lieutenant governor's office. I was with the ombudsman. I got a opinion letter from the corp council saying that I really was a resident because I had signed a lease and shipped my car and all this, had a job, contract, etc. And Eileen Loda said that, well, that's very good, but Paul Devins works for the mayor. I'm appointed by the city council. So the fact that it's a court council opinion doesn't control me. So fortunately for me, Walter Heen, who was then chairman of the city council, convened a meeting, I think it was like Tuesday or Wednesday, the bar went 5 mornings, in his chambers in the basement of the city council, and he read the corp council letter, heard from Eileen, and he talked to me, and he said, okay, give him a certificate. So she went up, unlocked the door, gave me my certificate, and I fortunately passed the bar. But what was
Did you give it to Sam? Did you give the certificate to Sam?
Oh yeah, the next day I gave the certificate to Sam, and Sammy said, good. The CJ said I should let you continue to take the exam all week, but if you didn't have the certificate by the end of the week, to tear up your answers. They weren't going to be graded.
Wow. So that added stress to the otherwise
but what was good,
very stressful event.
Yeah, it was pretty stressful. But what was good about it was that you had the sense that you could get things done here. It was small enough, and people were willing to hear you out. I mean, the lieutenant governor, he doesn't know me. I mean, why did he spend any time with me? But I thought if this had gone on in California, I would still be going in circles. So it was a traumatic but enlightening introduction to Hawaii, and the fact that the state is manageable enough and with good enough people in it that they're willing to work to get things done.
Yeah.
Pretty good. So we thought we'd stay for a while longer.
Good. And you've stayed for a
We've
long
stayed
time.
yeah.
Good
Yeah.
for you, Carol.
Yeah.
Where did either you, Jim, or you, Carol, get your induction notice about the same time Donald did, or?
No.
Okay.
I saw those induction notices, but none with my address on them.
Okay.
The interesting part was that my class of 69 in law school, was the last graduate class. They got exemptions all the way through law school.
Right.
So when I was at Stanford going to class, we literally had empty seats day to day because guys were either being drafted or heading out for Canada. It was scary times.
Yeah. Wow. So your law school class started in
So my law school class started in September of '66.
66, but by May of 69, there were fewer students.
Well, the classes after us, 67,
Okay.
68, where the guys were being drafted out of
Right.
law school.
Got you.
They didn't get
Yeah.
exemptions, so
Wow.
it was a interesting time.
A very interesting time.
And can I make one point about that? When I graduated from Berkeley at law school, our class had like 270 students, 250 men, 20 women. And so the graduation day, which is June of '68, I'm talking to the dean. I wasn't in trouble, I was just talking to him. I said, what's the incoming class look like? And he said, oh, the SATs are better and the GPAs are better, and they're about 1/3 women and 2/3 men. I said, 1/3 women? And he said, are more women applying? And he said, no, they don't draft women. And he had to fill seats, and the men are getting drafted, so
Exactly.
they put in the women. And once the professors had some women in their class, there's no way they're going back to an all-male class. I mean, they were people who were awake and prepared. And
Right. That makes
so,
sense.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a break now for a minute. Thank you.
Sure.
Here's the deal. I'm Jay Fidel. I'm the host of Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, which is the Energy Policy Forum's program on Wednesday. That's how we call Wednesday Energy Wednesday. We call it Energy Wednesday every Wednesday. Are you surprised? okay? And we try to get guys like Jim Alberts here from Hawaiian Electric who can tell us what's really going on in energy. We want to be informed. It's so important. It's the most important initiative in our state. Clean energy is major, okay? And that's why we cover it on this show. That's the deal. What do you think, Sharon?
I think that's great. That's why we're here every Wednesday from 4 to 5, and we hope you all join us so we can hear people like Jim coming on our show and co-host Ray Starling from Hawaii Energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here today. You've seen this. You heard what she said. What do you think?
I think it's a tremendous opportunity for people to come together and talk about the issues. Oftentimes, there isn't a good forum to bring these key issues out into the public, and this is a tremendous way to go about it. And the activity of this show is essential to keep talking about energy because, as you said, it's such an essential part of our lives that we need to pay attention to it and we need to think about the future.
Okay, Ray, your turn.
Well, this is a special time in the history of Hawaii where we're making some pretty radical changes in the way we use energy and generate energy. And this show is the one place you can count on coming to every Wednesday and hearing something about the latest issues that are on the table, being discussed, that will affect us all going forward. So come join us, and if you have some ideas you want to share with us about energy, give us a call and let us know. We'll put you up here and let you talk for an hour. So come see us.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Jim. It's great to be, from Think Tank's point of view, it's great to have this show. We love the show. It's our most important show. So come around and listen to us 4 to 5 on Wednesday. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you and welcome back to Living Legend Lawyers. We have 3 distinguished professionals with us today. We have Donald Wong, Jim Duffy, and Carroll Taylor. Donald, could you tell us about where how you ended up where you ended up? Give us that.
When I graduated, I got a job with the Attorney General's office. Bert Kambara was the Attorney General at that time. So it was my first job after law school. I stayed there until 1971, and then I went off to share offices with Steve O'Connell at the old Alexander Young building. So we were there for 3 years, and then in '74, we were joined by George Noguchi and Dave White, and we were over at the Davies Pacific Center. And eventually, in 1987, Steve and I moved over to join John Miho at Fong and Miho. So we started with them. And in 1989, Bill McCorson and Cliff Miller contacted us about starting a new firm. So we started the McCorson Miho firm in 1989, went over to Restaurant Row, and have been there for 26 years.
Been there ever since.
Yeah.
And that's where you remain.
I'm still there.
Yes, as an active practicing attorney.
I don't know how active, but I'm trying to practice.
Okay, good. Do you still work out at lunchtime, Don?
No, actually, I haven't done as much as I did before when I first met you. But I still try and walk and
That's
keep
good.
busy.
Good. Well, it shows. You look very fit.
Thank you.
Justice Duffy, could you tell us about how did you and Wally Fujiyama end up together? And tell us about the influence he had on your practice early on.
Well, the way we began is that kind of indicated before is we were on opposite sides of cases. And for some reason, known only to God, he took a liking to me because we were really opposites in many ways as far as demeanor and size and quality of voice and anything else you wanted to say. But we were drawn to each other, but I think it was a shared core values, as it turned out, that we both believed in the same things. And he could sense that, and I felt the same way about him. I mean, he really believed in personal integrity and loyalty to friends and to taking care of your parents and people that got you to where you were. And those kind of core values were always there with him in that. And the value of working hard if you wanted to achieve anything and that. So I think that's what really held us together. And he became a very close personal friend as well as a partner. It was a wonderful relationship that we have. But I mean, I'm not surprised that you asked, Greg, because I still get asked questions about how could the two of you coexist? You're so different and whatever. But it worked well in trial too, because we had two different personalities, and some liked Wally's style and some liked mine, and it just kind of went back and forth in that. But as far as a mentor, I couldn't ask for a better person in my life. I mean, it wasn't only about the law, it was about culture and giving back to the community and whatever. Because when I came out to Hawaii, quite frankly, I didn't know how many islands there were or anything about the population base or, and he just brought me into his world and shared the world and his clients too, and he got them to allow me to try their cases. And I'm sure at first they probably thought, we came to see Wally Fujiyama. We don't want a young Haole guy who's just practicing
From
law,
Minnesota.
really practicing. So it was kind of one of those relationships that was meant to be, whether it's fate or whatever, and it continued until he died in 1994.
Yeah, so how many
Just,
years would that have been?
Well, we were together 24 years. Our firm, Fujiyama, Duffy and Fujiyama, was 20 years.
Yeah, that's great.
We broke off from the Chuck and Fujiyama firm in 1971.
I understand that not only did he mentor you, but he mentored other young attorneys as well. Could you tell us about that?
It was an amazing thing, the way he shared information. I can remember a group of about 15 that we would meet every other month or so up at Wally's house. And there were people like Bert Jr. and Steve Okano and Dick Hirai and all the names that Wilfred Watanabe, and it's always a risk to name names and you forget that. But there were a group of about 15 of us that some in the prosecutor's office, some in the public defender's office. And he would go through from voir dire right down. We would take a subject a night, and he would give us his views and allowed us to ask questions and to be directly involved. I mean, Jim Koshiba was one I remember.
That's
too,
a generous thing.
being involved. Yeah, it was sharing what he had. And it wasn't just, I was impressed because it wasn't just with our firm. I mean, our firm people were invited, but it was really a bar education on somewhat of, I guess, selected basis. People that he thought were people that really wanted to learn and wanted to improve trial practice in Hawaii. And at that time, that was the early 70s, before the law school, there wasn't a trial practice. Well, there wasn't a law school. So
Yeah,
it wasn't
right. He
trial
was the
practice.
trial
Yeah,
practice
so it
or
was
trial
just-
advocacy.
Yeah, he shared an awful lot. He was very generous with his time.
That's wonderful. Carroll, tell us about your evolution. How did you end up with where you are, and what's it like being Kimo Leong's partner?
Well, your brother-in-law.
Yeah,
yes.
Oh,
He's a good guy. He's a very good guy. I worked at the Legislative Reference Bureau for a couple of years. Those two studies that I came out to work on, the disability and health insurance, both were enacted. And I went to work for Chun Kurndad, and Ed Chun was my mentor, who was just is a wonderful person, was a wonderful mentor. And he'd give you a task, and you'd go in and ask him a question. He says, oh, if I've got to do it, just give it back to me. I'll do it myself. And I said, no, Ed, I just need some basic direction. He was very good. He gave you a task, expected you to do it. And then he would review your work. It was wonderful for me. Then Jeff Hamilton and I left the firm, set up our own firm, Hamilton and Taylor. And then Peter Char and Roland Tom left Cade Schutte, and so we set up Char, Hamilton, Taylor, and Tom. And my practice in the estate and trust area and litigation in that area was sort of the outlier in the firm, which became apparent to me when they were interviewing new paralegals and they were interviewing nurses. So I said, wait. So I left the firm on good friends, good terms, set up my own practice. Kimo joined me, and then Greg Chi joined. Greg, unfortunately, passed away earlier than my retirement planning had anticipated. And so it's Taylor, Leong, and Chi, and it's Kimo and me at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. And you remain active.
I remain, yes.
Very, like Donald. And Justice Duffy, you're doing a lot of ADR, right?
right. That
Yeah.
was his work I really enjoyed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Donald, let me get to you, because we want to ask the three of you the long view. And specifically, I want to ask you about your professionalism. I mean, you're exemplary professionals. How did you become that way? What made you the way you are? Why do you treat people so well? Why are you so considerate? Why are you so diligent? And why are you so honest and straightforward? How is it that you become that way?
Well,
Is it something you're born with? You're trained by your parents? Or what is it?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I would think that it was my parents who instilled in me, whatever qualities that I could bring. I do feel that starting practice at the time I did, the legal community was a hell of a lot more civil and courteous than it is now. So you learn how to practice that way. If you were honest with opposing counsel and they were honest with you, you could get things resolved. These days, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, they come at you very confrontational, and you're in the defensive at the beginning. And it's always bothered me that the practice has turned out that way. But I try and be as honest and as upfront with clients and opposing counsel and people on the other side as I can. I mean, I just hope that that comes through.
Okay. And do you think that some of the younger lawyers who have worked with you and around you at your firm have picked up on that?
I hope that that some of them have learned that you can't be too demanding and confrontational in your dealings with the other side because they're going to come back with the same thing. And hopefully, we are able to maintain relations with other attorneys, across the state, so that we can, have an effective practice.
Do you think it's been beneficial to your clients to practice in that manner?
I think so. I mean, I think that one of the things that bothers me is hearing some cases where the amount of fees that are being charged by counsels, I think outrageous for the subject matter that's involved. And I don't know whether they're overworking the case or they just don't know what they're doing, or part of it is just because they spend so much time arguing with everybody. And hopefully, I don't want my clients to face that type of practice.
Well, thanks, Donald. Justice Duffy, could you tell us then about the transition from Fujiyama, Duffy Fujiyama, to the Hawaii Supreme Court? How did that happen?
Well, what happened, there was an intermediary step which failed, which seems to be consistent with my career.
Did you go into coaching at that point?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I thought about it.
Okay.
I had a call from Senator Noy in 1999 asking me if I'd like to go on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and it seemed like a good idea. Unfortunately, the election was the next year, so before I could get a hearing in that, the nomination was withdrawn. But in the meantime, I have pretty much disbanded the firm, made sure everybody had positions outside the firm, and everybody did have a job outside the firm by that time. So the next couple of years, I was just in a holding action on that, and then Governor Lingo called and offered me the position, ultimately in 2003, to the Hawaii Supreme Court. And
Right. You were one of her first appointments.
I believe I was her first.
Yeah. Great selection. She
Yeah.
started off well.
Well, thank you, Greg. I'm sure there are others that may have different opinions, but thank you for your support.
Of course. We're going to go into a commercial one more time. Thank you. We'll take a break.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the Think Tech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to Think Tech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the Think Tech Hawaii broadcast network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Welcome back to the final segment of today's program on professionalism with living legend lawyers, the 3-digit project of the HSBA. We have, again, three consummate professionals with us today, Donald Wong, Justice Duffy, and Carroll Taylor. And Donald, I wanted to get to you and ask you about the technological changes you've seen in our profession since you began right up to today.
Well, it's frankly amazing when I think how primitive we were when we first started practice. We lived and died with IBM typewriters, whiteout, and carbon paper. And then it evolved to mag cards. You remember the mag cards with the rectangular slip? I think that the best job in town during our early days was this guy, Denny Morrow, who was the IBM salesman.
Yes.
He didn't have to sell anything because everybody needed him more than he needed us. But that evolved. Then obviously fax machines came in, and it's amazing what the younger people can do now. My practice, Carol and I both live and die with email now, which we never did before. So, it's really interesting how practice has changed for the better, I would say, in terms of technology. But it was a lot different then.
Do you now let me ask you about filling out timesheets. Do you still do that, Donald? You fill
Yes,
out your timesheet.
yes.
That's how you keep track of your time on what quarter hours or probably
I do
tenths
it
now.
on tenths of an hour.
Tenths,
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure that's what clients demand now. Do you remember how that was inputted or how that was handled in the early days?
In the old days, basically, we were, just the old accounting book, and you just log your time and put the timesheets into the file. Then we evolved to some kind of more sophisticated system. And when the computers started to come in, obviously we had to try and figure out the best system that was available at that time. And it was difficult because everything was in its infancy, and you picked up a system and some things worked and some things didn't work, and you kind of lived and died with it. But it was very much different than what we're doing now.
I can imagine. Let me ask you, Justice Duffy, about trial practice difference between then and now, how things have evolved in the courtroom.
Yeah, well, in the early days in that, I think there are two reasons that there have been changes. In the early days, we didn't have quite as many lawyers, obviously, doing that, and there weren't that many in the trial practice in that. So, and each of us had at least 3 cases set per month, sometimes more. So we saw each other quite regularly in that, and we had to, you asked earlier about why and how do you get along? We had to get along. It just worked out well as far as settling cases and that, and we developed personal relationships and friendships with the people on the other side. And in my situation, I was trying both plaintiff and defense cases. We had, while we were a plaintiff's firm essentially, we did Island's defense work as well. So one week I'd be a plaintiff, the next week a defendant. But you had to get along with folks, but it wasn't a hard thing. Like I find it interesting that the meet and confer requirement is in a procedural court rule now. We met and conferred all the time. We would take the basic depositions and interrogatories and then call the other side up and say, do you want to meet at my office or yours? Can we settle this? And most cases got resolved that way without any great formality. Only if the case were going to be tried would we go into heavy duty preparing and taking depositions of everybody that conceivably could be a witness.
Right.
So I think that was a change, and maybe it is based upon the lack of personal relationships, that not seeing each other, because we knew one week I had a great case and the next week I was on the losing end for sure. So you couldn't be high mucky muck if you weren't sure how long this was going to go.
What was it like taking a verdict, either a favorable verdict or an unfavorable verdict, with these other practitioners who you knew and you trusted and you liked? What was that like?
Well, that brings up an interesting subject. On more than a few occasions, I waited with the opposing lawyer in a nearby bar to the courthouse. And there were a couple of occasions where we both hoped that there wouldn't be a question emanating from the jury, because I'm not sure how how well the response would have been framed. And one of them, I don't know if I dare mention, but I might as well. I mean, we're the old guys. Chief Justice Moon and I were in a bar, and it went on and on and on.
The deliberation.
The deliberation. So, but that's how it was handled. It was, I think we recognized that we were professionals, we were advocates for our clients' cause, but it wasn't a personal battle. And now in my mediation work, I do see some personal battles that kind of get in the way of resolving clients' cases, which is unfortunate. The other reason I was going to mention is that, for a change, is that I think there's much more emphasis on the business side of law than there was when I was practicing actively. And maybe it goes back to the lack of lawyers too, but there was enough business for everybody. So as Wally used to say, if you're a good lawyer, the money will come to you. But if you make money your goal, you're going to cut corners and get into trouble. And as a correlate, he'd also say, if you want to make big money, go into real estate or something. That the law wasn't set up for that. So I think those are at least two reasons why the practice of law in the trial field has changed.
Thank you. Carroll, professionalism. How is it that you are the way you are and such an exemplary, consummate professional and well known for that in this bar?
Thank you. It's nice of you to say that, and I appreciate that. And like Donald, your parents set basic standards, but and serious basic standards. But I well remember when Donald and I were sworn in front of Judge Pence in 1969. He told a story. The story was that he was a young attorney on the Big Island, and a client came to him and he laid out the facts of his case, and Judge Pence said, that case is a loser. You're going to lose that. You don't want to do that. And the client said, no, as a matter of principle, I do want to do this, and I want you to do it for me. So Pence said, well, okay, I'll do that. So he took the case. Case went to trial. They lost. And the settling up, Judge Pence presented his bill. He said it was a large bill. This is the mid-30s. It was a $50 bill. This was how much he was owed. And he said, you know, I'm sorry to have to give you such a large invoice, but I predicted that you would lose this case. The fellow said, no, I didn't lose this case. Pence said, what do you mean? He said, well, it cost me $50, right? Right. And I'm paying you $50, right? Right. And I can afford the $50, right? Okay. The other guy, he's got to pay his lawyer $50. He can't afford the $50. I won the case. And Pence said, I never want you to come into my courtroom unless you personally believe in the merits of your case. And that is like 50 years later, I still remember that. It resonated with me. But that makes it difficult when you take a case and you lose, because in your own mind, it's a case that should have been won. So either you blew it or the system didn't work. And that's sometimes hard to live with at times.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I think it's important that sometimes people lose sight of is that we're on an island, and we're going to go around and we're going to run into each other like Jim used to run into him. And next week, there'd be the same guy on the opposite side of the case a week later. You won't see it that frequently these days, but you are going to run into these attorneys the next time around. And when you do, you want them to know that you're good for your word, and you don't tell lies. Sort of golden rule.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Donald, let me ask you, talking about those timesheets and the technology, do you feel that there's more efficiency today? You can do 20 things where maybe in 1969 you did 2 things? Or are you putting a lot of .1s on your timesheet where maybe in 1969 you put 2.5 hours on your timesheet? What do you think about that?
Well, I've always tried to be accurate on my timesheets, but I think because of the technology, you can afford to do things quicker because you know that they're going to be logged in and in records in some electronic form someplace. So you don't have to do a lot of the paperwork that you had to do before. But in terms of time, it hasn't changed how I keep time. I mean, I try and put down accurate time for the amount of work and services that I do. So that hasn't changed over the years.
Okay. Donald, if if there's one thing that you would, say advise a young attorney, we're 10,000 now, almost 11,000 bar numbers. what would it be that if you had to address this class that just took the February bar, they'll be sworn in a month or two, is there anything you would like to tell them, any advice you'd give them?
I think I pick up on what Carroll said, you know, be honest, be sincere, don't play games. What goes around comes around. You're going to get, you know, cases where you're going to be losing, but you can't be personal about it. You gotta take it as a job, but you gotta do a good job.
Okay.
You know, your best your efforts.
Okay. Justice Duffy, how about you for the young
I
graduates?
see what I've learned over the years, at least my opinion is that we lawyers are among the three healing professions. Medicine heals the body, the religious people here that heal the soul, but we're the peacemakers in society by resolving conflict in a peaceful way. And if you use that as a mantra, you will do it in a way to help people resolve it, recognizing, I think, that most legal problems are really human problems that happen to have legal issues attached to them. And if you look at the clients as human people with problems, that'll go a long way toward helping them resolve their problems.
Thank you. Carroll, how about you?
There's an Abraham Lincoln quote, and I don't have it exact, but it's to the effect that you should always encourage your clients to settle for the very reasons that Jim was just alluding to. And if you do, more work will come your way. So you don't have to litigate the case because once you resolve, that's your last case. And I think lawyers have a great ability to influence a settlement. I had a case once where the way you asked the question dictated whether the client was going to try or not. You could either ask the question, are you going to let your son boss you around and have his way? And of course, the answer is no, I'll fight him. Or you could ask the question, do you want your legacy to your son and your daughter to be, here's a will contest so that you folks can litigate after I'm gone? The answer to that would be no. So it's the same fact pattern, but the way the lawyer presents the question dictates the answer. And if you follow Abraham Lincoln's advice, you opt towards settlement and you'll get more work later.
Thank you. Thank you, Carroll Taylor, 906, Jim Duffy, 775, and Donald Wong, 909. Thank you very much, you three-digit gentlemen. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Greg.
Greg.